This is BBC News. We'll have the headlines for you at the top of the hour, which is straight after this programme.
Hello everybody, a very warm welcome to Talking Business Weekly with me, Aaron Heslehurst. Let's go and take a look at what's on the show. Shipping gets stuck in the slow lane. How much damage will be caused by the Red Sea attacks, forcing global trade to take the long way round? The global economy relies on all our stuff being moved across the oceans, but are 150 years of progress being undone by an unprecedented threat to shipping? I'm going to be discussing all of that with these two. There they are, the big boss of the world's second biggest shipping company, Denmark's Maersk, who tells me that consumers, they're already feeling the effect with higher prices, and the boss of the UN's International Maritime Organization, who will fill us in on what needs to be done to keep the oceans free for global trade. Plus, big bucks for the big stage. The man who runs the world's biggest brewer, the giant behind Budweiser, Corona and Stella, tells us why he's spending hundreds of millions of bucks on the Olympics and why he's not worried about shipping delays. Wherever you're joining me from around the world, once again, a big hello and a warm welcome to the show. You know, just when the global economy thought it was getting over the shocks of the pandemic, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the inflation that followed, up pops another major challenge. This time, the shipping industry is quite literally under attack like never before, and it's causing growing disruption to the global economy. Diversions and delays are threatening to push up prices once again. The crunch point is the Red Sea. It's a conduit to the Suez Canal, which, since it opened more than 150 years ago, has boosted the global economy by speeding up trade between Europe and Asia. We can't underestimate just how crucial this route is for companies big and small, including this family-run gift business in the English city of Leeds.
Literally 100% of the lines are delayed. Going to scan that, mate. The difficulty what we have is that a Valentine's Day order is no good to a customer and a consumer on the 15th of February.
The likes of Tesla and Volvo have had to pause some car production in Europe as they wait for parts. And IKEA says there are delays getting some products onto the shelves. Those delays are growing because, despite US-led airstrikes trying to stop the attacks, which began in November, a growing number of vessels are being hit by missiles. The Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, who are responsible, have also tried to board ships, even managing to take the car carrier, the Galaxy Leader. They're still holding its crew hostage. They say the attacks are out of sympathy with Palestinians suffering in Gaza. So let's just take a look at why all of this is so important for our global economy. 90% of everything in your life, from the chair you're sitting on, to the banana you're eating, to the car you're driving, to the clothes you're wearing, and to the TV that you're watching right now, it's all moved by sea. 30% of all shipping containers were going through the Suez Canal, but depending on their final destination, going around Africa can add anything from 7 days to 2 weeks to a vessel's journey. And as you can see here, that means that shipping rates have soared in recent weeks. It's no surprise, given the longer journey can mean an extra $1 million in fuel alone, plus more insurance and crewing costs.
That gets translated into higher prices for people for everything from fuel to medicine to food. It's disrupting supply chains. And so it's having a real impact on people around the world in their daily lives.
According to the number crunchers at Allianz, that could mean global inflation goes up by 0.5% this year, just when it had been coming down. That would mean instead of the global economy growing 2.4% this year, it would just be 2%. Pandemic aside, that would be the worst since the financial crisis 15 years ago. So, with all of that to consider, I've been catching up with the man whose ships move around almost 1/6 of the world's containers. He's the big boss of the Danish shipping giant, Maersk. Vincent Clerc, a real pleasure having you on the show. And Vincent, let me start with this, because you said back on the 2nd of January that you would suspend all sailings through the Red Sea because of the attacks on commercial shipping. So just explain, Vincent, what are those risks? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, you've had at least 2 of your ships already attacked, right?
Yes, Aaron, you're right. Actually, this has starting to unfold as a widening of the conflict that we're seeing in the Middle East already in the month of December, where we had a first wave of attack, and one of our ships at the time was already under attack. We suspended temporarily the transit in there following the attacks. And then following some interaction with Operation Prosperity Guardian, led by the US Navy, we felt that we had the guarantees that we needed in order to guarantee safe passage for our crew, for our ships, and for our customers' cargo. And as we took this on, some of the ships went through, and the Maersk Hanja was attacked. It was attacked actually outside the zone that was defined previously as a danger zone for attack, and it was attacked with a new modus operandi, new weapon systems by the Houthis, and that basically redefined the level of threat and risks that we were faced with. And in the face of this change, we've had to suspend transit again and reassess the situation.
And Vincent, we're already seeing an international coalition of warships led by the US trying but not really succeeding to protect your ships and those of your competitors. What more can they do to help you? I'm just kind of wondering, Vincent, what's it going to take to make you feel safe again?
The first is to really call on to the international community to really mobilize around this. You have about 30% of global trade that transits through this route. This is one of the most important arteries of global trade. And having to reroute all of this cargo now south of the Cape of Good Hope is going to create significant disruptions to the global supply chain for the duration in which we have to do that, and probably a few months more as we have to get back then into normal. So you need to see, I think, a stronger mobilization. The other thing is that the level of threat is actually evolving. And so for the coalition that is trying to put in place this safe passage, they need to constantly reassess the level of protection and what they need to deploy in terms of both infrastructure, but also just the zone that they need to protect and the type of threat they need to be able to answer to. They need to constantly reassess this because this has been morphing actually repeatedly.
Avoiding the Red Sea means having to go, of course, the long way around southern Africa, which can add 1 to 2 weeks journey time. And one of those consequences, Vincent, is it means that ships are tied up longer. They're unable to get on with their next journey. How much does that damage the capacity of the global shipping system that we've all come to rely upon?
It is a significantly longer route that the ships have to sail. We expect that if this was to continue and all shipping services that are affected had to sail south of the Cape of Good Hope, that would actually demand an increase in capacity deployed anywhere from 6 to 7.5%, which is quite significant. It will be more costly, it will be slower, but it can be coped with in the long run. However, in the short run, as you're saying, a lot of the ships are being out of sync with their normal schedules, and we will see holes appear here in the first quarter, where actually you have sailing positions that are not being able to be filled in the short run, and that will create some disruptions.
The US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, he recently said that these longer trade routes, and I quote, increase the cost and time of moving food and fuel, medicine and humanitarian assistance. So, Vincent, does that extra cost ultimately just fall back into the lap of the consumer?
I think Secretary Blinken is absolutely right. This is impacting all the goods, from medicine to food to anything that you would find in a supermarket shelf, pretty much is being impacted by this. And that, hence the consequences and the need for a quick mobilization to have this situation resolved. We don't really see another solution right now than to sail south of the Cape of Good Hope. We have ships that are being shot at. We have colleagues that whose lives are at risk when this happens, and we can simply not justify sailing through these danger zones the way that the situation is right now. Actually, shipping prices have shot up as a result because of an anticipation of congestions and fear of lacking capacity in the short run. So you see already that some of the costs that Secretary Blinken is talking about is starting to percolate all the way down to the end consumer, which in these times of inflation is really something that we need to try to avoid.
You know, some critics, they will say that you and your rivals are very profitable companies, making billions of dollars in profit each year. So here's the question. Why should foreign governments and taxpayers foot the bill for keeping your ships safe?
I think the entire economies that we have in Europe, in the United States, around the Mediterranean, in Asia also for their exports and imports with those regions, depend on having safe trading routes. This is actually one of the key missions of governments around the world, is to guarantee safe trading, to guarantee the safety of the people and the assets that are moving and participating in global trade. And we shoulder a lot of the costs today through the deviation and so on. A lot of the costs are absorbed by the line, but the provision of security and safety is the role of governments and not of private companies.
And Vincent, just for the uninitiated, what sort of equipment do you have on board your ships to assist your crews in terms of avoiding boarding by rebels or pirates and of course, for their safety?
So normally only water cannons and fairly limited equipment, because traveling the seas is a safe operation from that perspective. As the attacks started and before we resumed the transit through the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb here in late December, we actually added armed guards on the ships to go through the danger zone. For the rest, we really rely on the protection of navies and the safety on the seas.
And as we know, it's not just the Red Sea that's posing difficulties for global shipping. The Panama Canal, it's cut the number of ships that it lets through because it, well, just simply doesn't have enough water. There are also the concerns about the Strait of Malacca, the South China Sea. All of that combined, how worried are you, Vincent, about your ability to move goods freely through the world's oceans?
I think that between the rise of geopolitics and also the impact of climate change, which we're seeing play out in the Panama Canal today, we're seeing an increased level of disruption that we need to work around. This is really a challenge for us to actually provide reliable and consistent service to our customers. And it just goes to show that a lot of the disruptions that we have seen over the past decade, they are still with us and they will continue for different cases and reasons. And it just means also that we need to continue to invest in building up the resilience of the global supply chain.
Well, on that point, Vincent Clerc, the big boss of Maersk Shipping, a real pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for your time. Good luck with everything, and we'll check in with you soon.
Thank you, Aaron. Take care.
OK, with pretty much every country affected, the United Nations Security Council has called for the Houthi attacks on shipping to end immediately. And the part of the UN that tries to keep the oceans safe is the International Maritime Organization, known as the IMO. So I've been catching up with the man in charge. Arsenio Dominguez, really good to have you on the show. And Arsenio, let me start with this, because one of the reasons the IMO exists is to look after the safety and the security of international shipping. So I have to ask you, given the scale of the threat in the Red Sea at the moment, is this the biggest challenge the IMO has ever faced? And of course, the key question, what can be done about it?
It is one of the biggest challenges that the IMO has faced, in particularly recent years. And the reality is that, as you mentioned, shipping is a global sector. We transport over 80% of global trade. So any actions that are happening out there that actually interrupt the trade, the global trade, will have a negative effect on you, on me, and on everyone in this planet. We need to work very closely with all the stakeholders, with all the member states, with other agencies, the United Nations in particular, in order to find practical solutions to a problem that we don't want to escalate.
Given something like 90% of everything in our lives comes to us on a container ship, just how important, Arsenio, is it to the global economy that the situation in the Red Sea is resolved and of course, resolved quickly?
We are recovering still from the negative effects of the COVID pandemic. And then if I just move back a couple of years ago, 2021, when the ship, the Ever Given, blocked the Suez Canal, we all noticed the negative repercussions on global trade around the world. So this is why we don't want the situation to escalate and to find the solutions that are going to maintain the flow of global trade. And yes, there has been the reference on container ship, but this is beyond that. We're talking about oil and gas and other raw materials that are necessary for the daily life of everyone in this world.
The boss of Maersk Shipping has just told me that the nature of threat to ships was constantly, his word, evolving. Arsenio, just how well does the international community understand the threat? And if it's not well enough understood, how much harder does that make it to tackle?
There are uncertainties in this situation. I mentioned piracy attacks off the coast of Somalia that were contained by around 2012. And of course, some of those measures that we put in place back then are actually applicable right now. Evading operational measures, informing and communicating the positions of the ships in order to find additional support among themselves as well when they're trading in the region. Diverting has been another practical and operational aspect. But we have to also look into how this evolves to see if there is any further practical measures that we can put into place.
And Arsenio, this is not just about the concerns of the global economy, because there's something like nearly 2 million seafarers out there around the world bringing us all of our goods day in and day out. And you're responsible, right? You're responsible for their well-being and their safety.
You're absolutely right. And I really want to thank you for raising that specific question, because normally we tend to focus on what is happening to ourselves, what is affecting us directly, and that goes into the trade and the financial aspects of these current situations in the Red Sea. But it's the unsung heroes, it's the seafarers that are out there day in, day out, making all these things possible. So we need to remember that they're actually victims, innocent victims of this particular case. And we have to remember that they are just as human as you and I, and we need to find solutions taking into account how detrimental all this is on the seafarers. And the well-being is paramount.
Well, let me ask you about your wonderful home country, Panama. It is home, of course, to another of the key routes for global trade, the Panama Canal. But it had to substantially cut the amount of ships it allows through over the last year just because it doesn't have enough water. How damaging is that situation to global trade?
It is. It's another negative impact. This one's particularly related to climate change, and is one of the very tangible negative effects of all the increments and the fact that we need to do something in order to improve the situation. Now, with the Panama Canal having these difficulties, the Red Sea situation, of course, once you start adding them up, this is what has a negative effect on global shipping. And countries, in this particular case, the Panama Canal, they're looking into solutions to improve this for the future. But for us, it's what we can do together, how we as a society also start to improve our green credentials.
Arsenio, when you add together the problems in the Red Sea, the Panama Canal, the concerns about the Strait of Malacca and the South China Sea, how worried are you about the world's ability to move goods freely through oceans and really what it all means for the health of the global economy?
The concern is there because of the current situation. The challenges are there. But for us, it's facing these challenges and finding solutions. I'm a very positive person, and I look back at the track record of this organization. We continue to evolve. We continue to face challenges, find solutions, move forward.
Taking these longer routes around South America or Africa don't just add costs, right? They also mean that the ships are burning more fuel, which, of course, very bad for the environment. Shipping accounts, as we know, for about 3% of global carbon emissions. Arsenio, do you think that these crises add to the importance of cutting those emissions?
The decision has already been made. So the crisis, of course, has that detrimental effect. Emissions will go up if we actually take longer routes. Safety will be also challenged because we're now going through rougher seas in order to actually avoid the situation that we have in areas like the Red Sea. But we have to focus on the main areas here. And we're all working towards the decarbonization. We will all learn from all these experiences, and we will continue to improve our regulatory process in order to achieve the objectives that we have already agreed in this organization, and that will take us to continue to support the Paris Agreement of 2015, where we all come towards the sustainability of the world.
And let me end on this. Arsenio, when it comes to the Red Sea, how long is all of this going to last? Because I'm just kind of wondering, is the world going to have to learn to live without a shipping route that has been vital to globalization and progress over the last 150 years?
I'm more positive than that. I think we have come across crises in the past, and we always find a solution and a way forward. Shipping will continue to be there. We will continue to supply all the necessary goods that we all need around the world. We will not be without shipping. We will find a way for shipping to continue to be resilient, to adapt, and to move forward.
Well, on that positive point, Arsenio Dominguez, the big boss of the International Maritime Organization, thanks so much for your time. Good luck with everything, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
OK, let's look at one of the possible bright spots for the global economy this year. It could be the Paris Olympics, which are now just 6 months away. And it might cost billions to host, but it's also supposed to generate huge returns for the host city and some of the world's biggest companies who sponsor it. So I've been catching up with the big boss of the newest member of that team, Belgium-based AB InBev. This is the company responsible for more than a quarter of the beer the world drinks, including brands such as Budweiser, Corona and Stella. Michelle Ducras, a real pleasure having you on my show. And Michelle, let's start with this, because this week on the show, we're looking at the vast disruption to the shipping industry because of those attacks in the Red Sea. So I want to start with that. As the boss of a major global company who ship products, I imagine, all around the world, what impact is the Red Sea situation and the Panama Canal problems, for that matter, what impact are those having on your company?
That's an interesting question, because we always say that one of the strengths of beer is that beer is local.
Right.
And in some cases we say that we grow our beer locally, from the ingredients that we source in the local communities, packaging, the brewing facilities. Beer doesn't really travel a lot.
Right.
It's a lot produced locally. We operate in 50 different countries, and we have local breweries in all of them. Yet we still have some exports around the globe. So I have less of an immediate direct impact from all these disruptions.
One of the reasons we're all here today, there's a media circus over there, is you're announcing this big Olympics sponsorship deal, of course ahead of the Paris Games this year. What's going on? Why are you doing that? And why is it worth, I'm assuming, the hundreds of millions of dollars that you're going to have to cough up?
We saw an opportunity here with Corona Cero to have this great beer in more occasions with emblematic competitions such as the Olympics, and we have billions of consumers across the globe supporting their national teams, cheering with their athletes.
And drinking your beer.
And we all know that sports and beer are a power duo. So,
you know, Michelle, I've got to ask you, how much is it costing? And when would you know that that investment pays off?
we're not talking about the specifics of the contract, but is of course is in the range of the standard contracts that the other sponsors have. Corona Cero is coming
we're talking hundreds of millions
as a
of dollars
top
now.
sponsor. And of course now the execution of this globally, the reach that we have, for example, Corona is in 180 countries globally, and the opportunity to further develop the beer category with non-alcohol is the business case, is the idea that we're pouring behind. But we also have values of excellence, respect, friendship that we as a company share with the International Olympic Committee that are an important part of this partnership.
Well, you just mentioned it, but one of the focuses of the Olympics sponsorship and the Olympic deal is this non-alcoholic beer. And we know, Michelle, right, that it's been a trend that's been growing really fast over the last few years. So again, I've got to ask you, how important is non-alcoholic beer for the industry? And I'm also wondering what's driving this change, if you will.
So today, the size of the non-alcohol, low-alcohol beers globally is a relevant market, like $13 billion in value.
Wow.
And is growing double digits. But moreover, if you think about what we call incrementality, so when people choose a non-alcohol beer, 60% of these revenues are incremental to the beer category. And this happens two ways. One, because you have like beer lovers like me that take a non-alcohol as an opportunity to have the refreshment, the socialization in more occasions. Right. And you also get people that don't drink alcohol and they want a beverage, they want to participate in social settings.
Do you ever see a day, Michelle, where you would see non-alcoholic beer be as a bigger seller than traditional, if you call it that, traditional beer?
As of today, you can't project that or say that, but what you see today that's interesting, non-alcoholic beer globally is growing faster than the total beer category. And this is great, because as we offer more moderation choices for consumers, they are embracing and adopting these brands.
And if we look at the US, where we've seen the success of lower alcohol beer, right? Bud Light, certainly one of the country's top sellers. That wasn't until last year, right? When it lost about 10.5% of sales in just a period of 3 months. And that was because of the boycott, which was triggered by this marketing campaign that used a transgender TikTok personality. I'm just wondering, what lessons do you think has the company learned from that situation?
I think that the key point on this is consumers, they want us to focus on what we do best. And they want Bud Light to do what Bud Light does well. They want beer brands and our company to focus on our core business and in the platforms that all consumers love. Part of these platforms are music, sports, entertainment. So the fact that we are here announcing the partnership with Corona Cero for the Olympics is us moving forward and getting to do what our brands do best, which is bringing to people entertainment, opportunities, and this easy way of enjoying life.
Well, on that point, Michel Ducaris, a real pleasure. The big boss of AB InBev, thanks very much for your time on the show. Thank you. Good luck with the Olympics, by the way.
For all of us, thank you.
Well, that's it for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, you can keep up with the latest on the global economy on the BBC News website and the smartphone app. Of course, you can also get in touch with me on X. X me. I'll X you back. You can get me at BBC Aaron. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.